Game development, a challenging task even for experienced designers. It can take entire studios of expert developers years to produce a game, and even then it is often buggy or unbalanced at launch. But can I learn how to produce not just any video game, a VR video game in just 100 days? This is my journey through the complex world of game development. It all started on June 24th when I was pondering how I could launch my views into the stratosphere. And then I realized all I had to do was find something that nobody else could do or was doing, get really good at it, pray there's an audience, and make high quality videos about it easy enough. So, the genius idea that I came up with was recreating popular video games but make them for VR. I knew it was going to be a challenge the likes of which I had never attempted before. My only experience with anything similar was a week-long summer camp that I took in 5th or 6th grade about game design, so I was really out of my element. My end goal was recreating Mario, but in an immersive VR environment and within those 100 days. This is undoubtedly the hardest video I have ever made. So if you enjoy, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. I am right on the cusp of 10k subs, so if you want to help me out by joining the Rat Gang and subscribing, I really do appreciate it. After spending a few days watching a ton of YouTube tutorials with only the occasional Beluga video sprinkled in, I was ready to start the actual development and created my first test world. I was following a basic tutorial by Valem and started making progress on the initial setup of my game. Even getting it to link to the headset and track the controllers was more difficult than I anticipated. But at this point, I was feeling pretty confident. So far, nothing had seemed that hard. There were challenges for sure, but nothing I couldn't handle. And after a few days of hard work, I had a small bowling simulation that I could strap on the headset and enter. Logging on to that world was one of the coolest moments of the 100 days I spent learning. My hands were literal rectangles, there weren't any movement options, you could barely pick things up, and the environment was just a table and a bowling lane. Even with all that in mind though, it was still really cool to put on the headset and be inside a world that I created. Even though it had taken me hours and hours of YouTube tutorials to get to this point, there's something magical about being able to create a world yourself and then strap on the headset and enter that world, even if it is super basic. And then, the next day, I realized how completely I had underestimated what it took to make a game. This step of my journey had me testing inputs from the controllers using a script, and it was my first interaction with C# coding. While the coding itself was fairly straightforward, it opened my eyes to how much I had to learn if I wanted to finish a polished game within those 100 days. I have zero experience with C# coding, and I realized I would probably have to learn at least the basics in order to make my game. When I ran into issues, I would just delete the entire chunk of code since I had no idea how to troubleshoot. Coming into this, I thought I would be able to create a semi-decent game with minimal coding, and everything I would need I could probably learn in an hour or two. Having to understand a lot of the language was more than I bargained for, and I came pretty close to giving up. However, having already invested a couple of weeks into this project, I didn't want to leave empty-handed, so after a few days of twiddling my thumbs, I got back to work adding custom hand models and animations. So now when I launch my game, it detects inputs from the controllers and plays animations accordingly. I also managed to write 2 original lines of code that were not copied directly from a tutorial, which was a pretty big milestone. After adding animations, I felt like I was really starting to grasp the scope of what was possible, but there was no way I was ready to make an entire game by myself without a tutorial. At this point, it still felt like I hadn't made much progress towards my final goal and was starting to lose my motivation. After all, I still had to learn an entire coding language, model, texture, and animate everything I would need for my game, and learn a lot more about basic VR development, like how to detect pressing a button, or collisions with objects, or so many other things. Regardless of how far I had come, it still felt like I had an unmanageable amount of work left. I refused to give up, but with school starting and my motivation draining, I started working on my game less and less frequently. For more than a month and a half, this went on, until I finally confronted the truth. My Mario game was never going to get finished. And so I was forced to shift my focus. The game I originally wanted to make was simply going to take too long. So instead, I decided to finish up what I was working on, add a small medieval immersive environment, and call it quits. Adding the medieval area was actually kind of fun. I used some free pre-modeled assets from the Unity store and started arranging them into a scene. It felt like putting together a Lego set in a way. Everything was already made for me, I just had to put it in place. While it did take a couple of weeks of hard work to get the whole scene together, I was having fun, and the knowledge that I was almost done with the video gave me enough motivation to finish it in a somewhat timely fashion. And now, after all of that, I can present you with my final game. Here it is. Okay, here we are. This is what I've spent 4 months working on. I still have the original bowling simulation. Let's go. Too good. Yeah, so this area here, I was testing out my teleport stuff. Just teleporting all over around the boxes. This medieval area here, this is what I've spent the past couple weeks working on, and this was what I'm really excited to show you guys. Yeah, so over here we have a little outside area, a little chopping lumber station. This torch here, oops. Yeah. And then you can go and pick up, like, oh, I want this spoon. I could spoon some spices. Get out of here. Yeah, just a bunch of various props, bricks, which are actually pretty light. Look at it. Either that or my character is very, very strong. Yeah, so I've got a sword and a shield and this little dummy. I can bam, bam, bash, ha, shk. You'd be so dead if I was gonna actually fight you. And then the inside of the house, that's another area that I'm pretty proud of. We've got this bookshelf here, these, like, some paper. This is a massive mug. Good God. Yeah, we've got paper, a mug, you know, just a bunch of various props to add ambiance. A little rug here. And then over here we've got like the kitchen table, some cooking utensils and things. Obviously I didn't texture this stuff or like model it in Blender or anything, but still, you know, I'm pretty happy with how these things turned out. Even if it is just like dragging assets that I pre-downloaded. And then upstairs is pretty simple. We just have a bed, a table, a window with a view of some sandy hills. I know that this house may look like pretty simple, except, I don't know, I had fun making it. It took me a long time to get all these little details in, and I'm happy with how it came out. I know it may not look like much, but that has taken me an unbelievable amount of time. It doesn't really hold a candle to professional games, and it's not like anyone's going to want to jump into my game for fun, but still, I've created something that I'm proud of. And even though I'm not a professional developer by any stretch of the imagination, I still learned a lot from my experience. My biggest takeaway from these 100 days is just how much goes into creating even simple games, especially ones in VR. Having to create an immersive environment for the player is extremely difficult, and now while playing Lone Echo or Half-Life Alyx, I have a new appreciation for all the love and attention the devs put into their game. All the little interactions with the environment that aren't obvious to the player were something I kind of took for granted before. But knowing more about the effort put into creating these small interactions makes me appreciate them so much more. There are so many tiny touches that further the immersion in these games and makes them incredible. And so, there you have it. While this video has taken far longer than I ever imagined, I'm proud of what I've created. Logging onto the world that I built, that I put the effort into making, is extraordinarily cool. And yes, even though it has taken me 4 months, I'm glad I put the time into creating this, and I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching, thanks for the patience, please consider joining the Rat Gang and subscribing to help me reach 10K, and I will see you all in the next video.